Hey folks, welcome back. I'm Dave and we're here in my shop where I build E-War guitars. Well, the great guitar build-off is behind us. My guitar is finished and I happened to get it in on time and I just barely made it. But those of you that were following along prior to the guitar build-off know that I was working on this guy right here before I had to stop this real quick and get on that other guitar so I could get it finished in time. And so this is basically a Tele-ish type of guitar. I did a tilt back headstock and I'm using P90s and I've got a different type of bridge. I've got a regular string through Godot string through bridge. So it's not exactly a Tele, but it kind of looks like a Tele. But anyway, so when we left this guitar off, I just finished painting and then I level sanded it, buffed it and polished it. And my next normal step in the process of building a guitar is to get back on the fretwork. I did the fret install quite some time ago, and I did that, and all I do is I bevel off the edges, and I just basically kind of leave it alone until the guitar is almost finished, and that's when I'll start the leveling, crowning, and polishing of the frets, which is what we're going to do in this video. So I think what I need to do is let me go ahead and turn down the camera because I've got all my tools laid out here that I use to do this, and I'm going to walk through each of the tools first, and then we're going to get going leveling and crowning these frets. Okay, so the tools I'm going to use to do this fret work is first I've got my long guitar scale length notched straight edge, which is going to go on there because you got to set that fretboard perfectly flat using the truss rod. So I've got that. Of course, I got my tape and I've got a little. You see my wax paper down in a piece of MDF here. I got a little trick for masking off the fretboard. I've got that. Once it's leveled and taped off nice, I'm going to use my Sharpie to mark all the frets. That's going to be a guide to us as we're sanding. And I'm going to sand it with, this is a 12-inch radius sanding beam. It's a Stu Mac. I get the long one only because it covers almost the entire fretboard with one pass. So I kind of like that. And I'll stick a little 320 sandpaper to it. So I got that. And once we're leveled really good, I'm going to use my fret rocker, of course, to check it, and that's another Stu Mac tool. I'm going to check all the frets to make sure there's absolutely no rocking on any of them, and then I'll start radiusing I'll start crowning the frets. And to do that, to put the crown back in them, I've got this Z file. I use the original Z file. It's really cool. It's got diamond filings on both this edge and this edge, and it has an offset V on each side. So one side of the offset cuts steep and the other one cuts shallow. So you go like that a few times and you flip it over and it's just the opposite. So it kind of speeds it up a little bit, and that's a really nice tool. They ain't cheap, but that's a really nice tool, the Z file. So I'll use that. And so once I've got them re-crowned, I'm going to go back through. I'll go through with my little fret rocker several times during the whole process to keep making sure that it's I'm not overdoing anything, that I still don't have any rocking amongst any of the frets. And once that's done, then I'm going to use my little my fret end file, which is a little file. It's rounded on the bottom where you're holding it up against the fretboard like so, and I'll use this to round over the edges of the frets. And what else do I have? Oh, so once everything has been re-crowned and we're still good, and I've rounded all the ends of the frets nice, I'll start with 320 sandpaper. I'll go to 400, 600, and 800 grit sandpaper, and I'll go over each of the frets very carefully, sanding all of the scratches out from the sanding beam in the file. So I'll go over each one and I'll bring it all the way up to 800 grit with that. And then once that's done, I've got my Dremel tool that I'll use. I've got a little wheel on the end here, and I've got a pack of spares over there. I'll use my Dremel tool and that little buffing wheel with this metal polishing compound, and that'll bring those frets all the way back to a real nice shine. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to get started first by leveling this thing, making sure we're really good, and then we're going to mask it off and get rolling. Okay, so I've got my, right now my truss rod is just sitting here in a neutral position. I've got my my little wrench in there, and I've dropped my light down. I've got a nice little desk type light here that's almost the same length as the fretboard, which will give me a really nice indication of, I'll be able to see under that fretboard really well. Oh yeah, I see a lot of daylight. So that thing is definitely bowed up in the middle. So let me adjust this. I'm barely turning this, just a smidge at a time. I'm still seeing some daylight on the ends. I promise you, you put a light like that right behind that fretboard, you could see the most slightest sliver of daylight through the thing. And I'm seeing really nice. There's a tiny little bits of daylight in a couple little spots, but that's probably more of a variation in the wood, how I'm sitting on the grain more than anything else. But I think overall we're very flat. So that's good to go, and we're ready to go ahead and mask this thing off and move on to the next step. First I use this 3/4 inch wide masking tape, and you'll see in the end why I'm doing this. But I run it along the edge of the fretboard, just below the frets, and I'll mask this on both sides, just like that. Okay, so now this is a little trick I learned from watching Chris Monk on Highline Guitars for masking a fretboard. And I've been doing it that way ever since, and I think it's a good idea, so I'm going to show you all how to do it. Anyway, I just got a piece of MDF here, and I stuck a little bit of wax paper down on it. I go ahead and take this wider tape here, and I lay out 2 runs. I overlap it maybe 1/4 inch or so. Something like that. Just like that. Okay. Okay. Now, I take my calipers, and they don't even have to be on, and I do this here. I just measure inside the frets right there. Let's see, I think I like starting on this end. I just poke 2 holes in there. Get in a little square. My X-Acto knife. Cut. Cut. And we have a perfect fit. Now I just do that 21 more times and we can move on. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and mark the top of each fret with this Sharpie. And what's going to happen when we start sanding the frets with that radiusing beam, we'll be able to see right away which frets are higher and which are lower. And what you want to do is you want to take off as little as possible off the high ones until you come down and you take all the black Sharpie mark off the lowest of the frets. Once you do that, then that should be perfectly level from end to end. And as an extra step of precaution, and after that, use a fret rocker to make sure all the individual frets don't need any additional work. Okay, now get my sanding beam, make sure it's nice and clean here, and it is. And this is a 320 grit paper. Just put it on there. Tear it off on the ends. We'll save that little piece for later. Now, so I've got the body supported down here, and I've got the neck supported right in the middle, and I'm going to use as little pressure as possible, and it just clears my my neck rest here. I'm going to use as little pressure as possible. I'm going to try to keep in the center. I really don't have much more pressure than just the weight of the sanding beam, which is very little. So if we stop and look right here. So I've got some black here, got black on most of that. I've got, looks like each fret, well, that one hasn't been touched yet, so that's a pretty low one. That one's completely all the way across. That one's a little spotty still, so, but I can kind of get an inference as to where we're going with just that little bit of sanding. So I'm going to keep going. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good now. I've got a couple of these up here a little lower than I really wanted them to be. But overall, I think I've hit the tops of them nice. So now I'm going to go through with my fret rocker, and I'm going to check it each 3 frets with very gentle hands. I'm going to check it 3 spots. I'm trying to hold my fret rocker parallel to the center line. Okay, even though I've checked all the frets out with the fret rocker and I got no rocking out of it, if you could look carefully down here, it's a little bit spotty on these last couple of frets. So something that I like to do anyway, sometimes I don't always do it, I like to taper off the last 5 frets just to get help get a lower string action up here without the string vibrating against any of these really high frets. So what I've got here, I've got my shorter sanding beam. This is still a 12-inch sanding beam. It's one of the wooden ones. And I've taken 2 pieces of tape right here, and I've layered 2 pieces of tape here, and I've layered 2 pieces of tape onto these top of these frets here. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to lightly sand these last, and I'm probably going to wind up hitting 3, maybe 4 frets on the end here. I'm just going to knock them down just a little bit, and that tape will give me just a slight bit of taper, which is just going to create a bit of a fall away on these last frets. So I think I may be hitting so I definitely hit the last one. I blew off that dust. I should have left it on there. So I'm definitely hitting 2. I think I knocked down the end 3 frets, and I think that's good. I've now got it across the whole top of the thing. Like I said, I already checked it with the fret rocker before, and it was great. But so now I think that's going to be even better. Okay. So now I've got my Z file. Okay. Now I'm going to start up here on this end. Oh, almost forgot. What I've got to do now, so I'm going to remark the tops of each one of these frets. So as I go with the Z file, I'll be able to tell when I reach the flat spot right in the middle, because you don't want to go any further. So I'm going to take this big wide Sharpie mark, and I'm going to narrow it down to it looks like a little pencil line going right down the middle. And I'm going to use my Z file to do that. When I get that down to a little pencil line, That will mean that these frets are recrowned. I've got the peak is right in the middle, and they should work really well. So you can see now right down the center I have a very thin pencil line left, still a little bit thick in that end. I think I'm going to hit this end just a little bit more. This was one of those frets that I was leveling one side and it really wasn't touching the other. There you go, that looks pretty good. I got a really nice thin line right down the center of the fret, and that's what we're going to do 21 more times. So this end definitely starts getting a little bit trickier. I usually put a good bit of tape on the guitar body. I try not to hit it, but sometimes you do. You can see right there, I touched the tape there and there. That would have definitely been a scratch in the finish. So when I get down to the end, then I'll kind of come from both directions. Okay, so I don't know how well you can see it. I'll try to zoom in the camera here. But I've got just a very skinny little black line down the center of each of these frets, and I think we're in pretty good shape. So before I move on, just as out of an abundance of caution, I'm going to go through with my fret rocker once again and check all these guys to make sure nothing has changed. Okay, so I think it looks good. So now the next stage we're going to do, we're going to get this guy right here, which is my fret end file. And I'm going to make sure I've got the rounded part facing down. And I'm just going to go to each one of these very carefully and do my best to knock off those corners and try to get as close to like a hemispherical shape on the end of each of these frets. Just like so. I'm kind of rolling the file as I go. You definitely want to catch that corner of the fret where it meets the fretboard. And I'll go over the top a couple times too, just to get that rounded down just a little bit. Okay, so they are now filed, and I'm ready to stand up straight. What I like to do, I already did it after I finished this side. This is a little bit of 320 grit paper, the same stuff I use to level the frets with, and I'm just going to go ahead and run my hand over the thing. just kind of take away some of those file marks and just further round it a little bit more, you know. Okay, they look pretty nice. So, now what we've got to do, and this to me is the most tedious part of the whole thing. I take little pieces of sandpaper like this, that's 320, and I just start sanding. I kind of hold it right up in there, and I push my thumbnail right at the base of the fret, and I've got the paper bent back, so I'm trying not to touch that top, and I can still see my line there. Of course, those lines will go away as I'm sanding, but I'm doing my best to not touch the top of the fret at all, while at the same time sanding up the sides of it. And oftentimes is the case, I'll have to change out a little bit of this tape now and then as I'm going through this, and that's just the way it goes. So I'm going to do this exact same process with, like I said, I'm going to start with 320, going to go to 400, 600, and then 800. And after that, I should be able to hit it with my, my Dremel tool with that polishing wheel on it, and they ought to shine like a brand new penny. Well, a nickel. Okay, so this is the 800 grit. The 800, I'm kind of hitting the tops a little bit more than I did before. Trying to hit both sides and across the top too, which those lines are just about gone by now anyhow. Just trying to give it as uniform of a sheen as I possibly can before I start hitting it with the Dremel tool. Okay, now I'll take a longer piece and go over these ends. All right, time for the polish. I've got this Dremel tool spinning, looks like it's on about 15,000. Maybe slow that down a little bit. Let's see how it looks. Very nice. That looks good. If they all look like that, I'll be very happy. Okay. So let's wipe those down. I cleaned them up to here already. They are looking really good. I'm quite pleased with how that's turning out. So the last thing I like to do, once I get all the tape off, is I like taking my little scraper here. I got a sharp scraper. I just return the edges on it so it's nice and sharp. And I like going over the fretboard, and I'll just run this over going both directions from the frets, just to get anything that might have gotten on there, if any of that compound got under the tape or anything. And I also like to hit the corners too. I'll give it one last little round over to make it really smooth and comfortable for the players to play. Anyway, so that's it. That is how I do my, that's how I level, crown, and polish my frets and finish up the fretboard. Oh, and then when I'm all done, I'll throw a coat of linseed oil, boiled linseed oil on this also, maybe 2 coats. Anyway, that's how I do my thing. I hope y'all dug it. I hope somebody got a little something out of it. And if you liked it, how about you hit the like button? And if you'd like to see more stuff like this, how about you hit the subscribe? Anyway, next week come on back and we'll be doing our nut on this thing. I'll make the whole nut from scratch and I'll show you how I do it. Anyway, God bless you all. Have a wonderful week and we'll see you all in the next one.